Good morning. Our lesson today comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and if you'll notice out there, there's an A. Eric was talking a while ago about John 9:39b or something like that, and I had him to look up there. That means that there's going to be something next week out of 1 Corinthians 10. And I want to just confess right now, I stopped at verse 13 for this lesson because I don't know how to handle the rest of it. I'll figure it out, but right now I'm kind of at a loss as to where to go with this thing, so we'll see what happens, all right? This chapter is connected to number 9. You don't want to do chapter 10 without connecting it. Paul has ended the 9th chapter by saying he had to keep his body under subjection. That thought is what this next piece in chapter 10 is all about. Chapter 10 begins with moreover. So not only is the thought connected with chapter 10, but he connects it with the word moreover. You cannot separate the two. He then goes into warning and reminding them of Old Testament examples. What do Old Testament examples mean to you? I'm glad I don't live there. That's pretty good. Well, one of the things that you get out of the Old Testament is that God has a relationship with man. I mean, you start back with Adam and Eve, and he walked with them in the cool of the evening, and you think about not as a creator over some pawns that he's moving around, but he's walking not on top of them, he's walking with them. And I think that's important because that scenario of God working with man and having a relationship with man goes all the way through. Take, for instance, Israel out in the wilderness. God took care of them. Not only did he take care of them, but he was with them in the cloud and the pillar of fire. It's a relationship. And when they come to worship to the temple, he is in the Holy of Holies. He's there, and they're coming before him. I mean, you just keep going on and on and on through the Old Testament, and you get this relationship thing going on. So let's get to the text. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. Moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant. What does ignorant mean? Not knowing. You have not learned that. You don't know that. It is not an ugly word. It is not something that is to cut you down. All of us are ignorant on some things. And I'll use me as an example on the rest of this chapter. After verse 13, I'm kind of ignorant right now. I'll be honest. How that all our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea. What image comes to your mind when you read that phrase?
Exodus, Egypt.
Yeah, it is Exodus and Egypt. Talking about something in the church. Well, it's in the next piece, so let's just go ahead and put it up and inform you ignorant people. And we're all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. Now, Adam Clark says the word unto should be into. Baptized into Moses. And it doesn't mean into Moses particular, but it means into the covenant that Moses made with God. Have you ever made a covenant? You got married. Okay. And I now put that word covenant in all the marriage ceremonies that I do. I don't do one unless that word's in there. Because what that means is that it is an agreement between two people. Is that not what marriage is? When God gave the covenant of the old covenant unto Moses to give to Israel, he made an agreement with them. I will be your God and you will be my people. But in order for you to be my people, God required them to do some things. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt have no other gods before me, and so on. That was an agreement that they made. And God spoke to them in the 20th chapter of the book of Exodus, and they said, no, we don't want to talk to God anymore. You find out what he wants us to do and we'll do it. And they promised that they would do what God said. They did that twice in the history of Israel, at least that I know of, maybe more than that. They promised to do what God said. So they were baptized into Moses. Why would he put that up there since he says, I have to keep my body under subjection? Well, because even though they made the covenant, the next few verses are going to say they didn't keep it. They were not in control of what they did. I keep my body under subjection. And I think I need to also go ahead and put why that's in there. Do you remember earlier in the 9th chapter, Paul talked about going to the idol's temple and eating meats, but I'm not going to do it because I don't want to cause my brother to stumble. I have the liberty to do it, but I want to keep my body under subjection. He's not talking about sin. He's talking about doing what's right toward his brothers. And now he says, this was a situation where they made a covenant with God, and they did all eat the same spiritual meat. I wish the word meat there wasn't used. Because what did they eat that was spiritual? Manna. Manna, and it was bread. However, if you go into the Old Testament, only one time in the Old Testament will you find where the meat offering is actually meat. What is the meat offering in the Old Testament? It's fine flour mingled with oil, and it can be either in the liquid form, which you eat it with the sacrifice that was made, the roasted meat, or it's in a cake form. Whichever way you got it, you got either bread or you got gravy. Meat and gravy. Hey, God's taking care of his people, y'all. I don't know any man doesn't like that. They ate the same spiritual meat. He's talking about the bread, the manna that God gave them. If you go to the New Testament and into the church, what do you liken that to? The communion. The bread of the communion. And what Paul is saying here, not only did they make a covenant with God, but they also partook of those spiritual elements. He says they did all drink the same spiritual drink. What did they drink that God gave them out in the wilderness? Water. And the writings of the Jewish rabbis say, it's not in the Bible, even though I think it's probably inferred there, the writings of the Jewish rabbis say that water followed them through streams wherever they went all 40 years. So God was still from that rock producing it. For they drank from that spiritual rock that followed them. There it is. The rock didn't move. The rock stayed perfectly still. But the blessing from the rock followed them. And that rock was Christ. Taking it out of context, but making a spiritual application. Does Christ follow you? Making the connection of that imagery to this imagery. Do the blessings that Christ gives to you, stay with you, follow you? Now, church, you put yourself on the same plane, because when you became a Christian, guess what you made to God? A covenant with Him. You made a covenant. And every Sunday you gather here and you eat the bread and you drink the wine, which is a renewal of your dedication to Him, which is a remembrance of what He did for you, which is a spiritual uplifting and spurring on. You're right here. Don't forget, you're right here in the same situation that Paul sets up out of the Old Testament. Let's see what he says. But many of them, God was not well pleased. Now, in the little class earlier, Eric gave us a scenario where God may not be pleased with me. You know? Now, I'm going to caution you on that, Eric. Okay? He's exactly right. He said it exactly right. He had the right information. It was all good stuff, Eric. You did a good job. But folks, you will never do enough work to get you to heaven. You're not going to go to heaven by your work. But does God have work for us to do? Yes. Yes.
You're not going without work.
That's what James says, isn't it? That's what he said. For they were overthrown in the wilderness. Whoa! Let's see. They were God's people. He delivered them out of Egyptian bondage. He took care of them in the wilderness. And I'm finding out all kinds of new stuff on that. For instance, they had children that grew up in the wilderness, right? Their clothes never wore out. What happened with the size of the clothes? They had to grow along with the kid. Huh? Spandex. Yeah.
Wish I had something like that now.
Is that true? Not only that, but the soles of their shoes never wore out. 40 years they wore those shoes. Now you would think that if that were happening to me, and God was feeding me in the morning and in the evening and giving me water to drink, my clothes didn't wear out, He's taking care of me and protecting me with a cloud and with a pillar of fire, you would think I'd keep the covenant. Oh yeah, God, I'm going to do exactly what you say. But they were overthrown in the wilderness. What was their first problem? Well, when they came across the Red Sea, they sent some spies in, did they not? And there were 2 of them that did good and 10 of them that did bad. And the people believed which one? The 2 good ones or the 10 bad ones? Yeah, 10 bad ones. Don't be too harsh on them with your judgment, because if I have 2 people to believe or I have 10 people to believe, which am I probably going to believe? The 10. Yeah. But does that not speak something about your faith? Now remember, they have the covenant. Now these things happen. Why? For our examples. To the intent, here's God's intent, that you should not lust after evil things, as they also lust. Is it hard for us to stay away from evil? You turn on that old TV and is any evil on there? And yet you don't turn it off. Just think about that. He said these things. There are examples so we won't go after evil. I don't know what your evil is, okay? All of us have something about us that's evil.
Well, it's a war, though, Charlie, that we have.
It is a war. And it's real. It's not physical, it's spiritual. It exhibits itself through the physical, but the war is going on inside of us for our souls. How does it exhibit? Well, I'll murmur or whatever. I'll fuss. I'll be negative. And then I know I've done wrong. Lord, forgive me. I guess I need to say, my wife, forgive me, please. Verses 7 and 8. Neither be ye idolaters as some of them were, as it is written. We'll get what is written there in just a minute. What did they do? Left the first love. Reference from Revelation. The first love should have been God. We don't know what's happened to this Moses. Build us a calf. Why did they want a calf? They wanted something they could put their hands on and see. Is that not kind of how we are? It was more than that. Now, Aaron said that calf just came out of the fire, didn't he? I just put that in and that calf came out. Right, Aaron. You need to know something. They had spent 430 years where? In Egypt. Do you know what they worship in Egypt? Calves. So they had had 430 years of generation after generation seeing these calves. And that to them, that was God. So make us a calf. Your calf does not have to be made out of gold. They got the gold from the people. The people all gave it. And they borrowed it from the people out of Egypt. That's right. They wanted to worship God. That calf was said to be the God that brought you out of Egypt. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. There's all kinds of innuendos in that statement. Number one, you go back to the idea of the pagan gods and their temples and their worship, and how all things are very different from what Judaism was, and it's very different from what we do. We don't know what all was in that. There are some writers who say that this was an orgy, a sexual orgy. And you need to know it may have been, but it may not have been too. They rose up to play. What we do know about it is from Exodus chapter 32, they were naked. God's people stripped off naked and were playing. You can go from there.
Well, is that like mob mentality? Why was nobody saying, hey, we aren't supposed to do this?
Well, you have to know that society was completely different back then than it is here in the United States. It is completely different around the world than it is right here in the United States, especially here in the South. I was really surprised when I went on a mission trip to Trinidad, and my room was there on the coast, right? You know, right there. The sea was lapping up within 30 feet of where I was sleeping. And I get up that morning to watch the sunrise, right? And here comes this guy in his boat. He's completely naked. And there are women and children. They're all on the beach down here. And he didn't think anything about it. They didn't think anything about it. Why? Because where they took baths was I'm going to say a community bath. It wasn't really, it was a spigot on the side of the road. And they just stripped off and bathed, men or women. That's a very different kind of culture than what we've got. So this rising up to play naked could have very heavy sexual innuendos. But you need to know it may not too. The next verse says, neither let us commit fornication as some of them committed and fell in one day 23,000. Well, if you're going to put sexual fornication on that, you've got to put that every one of them were married. They may have been, but some of them may not have been married. What had they done? Do you remember when Moses came down because they'd made the golden calf? He came down and he had something in his hands. What was it? 10 Commandments. And what did he do with them? He threw them down and broke them. He didn't drop them. It was not accidental. He threw them down and broke them. Was he mad? Yes. But I contend with you that was not why he broke them. Why did he break them? Because Israel had made the covenant with God and they broke the covenant. Therefore, the tables of the covenant Moses threw down and broke. And it was spiritual fornication. They had left God, gone against Him. Might there have been some sexual fornication in there? Yes. And that's bad enough. But I want you to know that's not nearly as bad as a spiritual fornication. Verses 9 and 10. Neither let us tempt Christ, as some of them were tempted and were destroyed of the serpents. Now he's transitioning. He's still got them in mind because of the serpent bit, but he's got now us in mind because of Christ. Christ followed them, yes. He was the rock that followed them. But to you and to me, the example was they fell. They did not keep the covenant they had made with God. I became a Christian, and I made a covenant with God. And when a person goes away from God and stops being faithful to Him, guess what? You've broken the covenant. Can the covenant be renewed? Yes. You know how I know that? Because God said, Moses, make another copy or make another 2 more tables, and I will write on them the words that were on the first covenant. Do you get that? The first covenant? God is making the covenant again with His people. What is this serpent stuff? Huh?
He represented the devil in the garden.
Yeah, he did in the garden, but that's not this. You got to go much later. They disobeyed God just right after this. And He sent fiery serpents among them. And what did He tell Moses to do? Make a brass serpent and raise it up, and any who looked to it, the serpent bites were not going to hurt them. Jesus said, as Moses raised up the serpent, so must the Son of Man be raised up. The imagery of that serpent on the pole is the imagery of Jesus on the cross. They were destroyed as serpents. Neither murmur you, as some of them also murmured and were destroyed of the destroyer. I really, really, really don't like that, Paul. I wish you had not said that. And let me connect it so you'll know why. Because that says, my dear friends, when you murmur against the church, you're murmuring against Christ. And we need to clean our language up. We need to be very careful what we say about other Christians, congregations, because that's Christ. Now all these things happen unto them for ensamples, and they're written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. What's an admonition? Huh? It could be a warning, but it has more to do with encouragement, spurring on. These are coming to encourage you to be faithful. And in this sense, there was some warning in it, was there not? Yeah. Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. You need to know that the tense of the Greek verb there, thinketh and standeth, is continual in action. It means a lifestyle. If I have the lifestyle, if I continually think that I am safe and secure, I need to be careful. Why? Because as they were tempted in the wilderness, guess what I can be? tempted also. And as they left God in the wilderness, guess what? I can do the same thing. Verse 13. There hath no temptation taken you but such as is common to man. Don't talk about your trials and troubles and tribulations as though nobody else had experienced that thing, because that comes to all people. In the Old Testament it says time and chance happens to everybody. But God is faithful. In my trials, in my tribulations, I may not be faithful, but guess who is? God is faithful. And there are about 12 verses in the New Testament that tell you that either God or Christ are faithful. They're not going to leave you. They're not going to trip you up. They're not going to desert you. No matter what happens to you, they're going to stay with you. And listen to this. Who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you are able. Now there are some caveats in that little statement. It does not mean that God is not going to allow something to come upon you that normally you wouldn't be able to stand against. But what it does mean is that He is going to send you the strength to go through it, no matter what it is. But will with the temptation also make a way to escape. The way to escape may be bear it, because that's what He says. Then you may be able to bear it. And the escape there may not be the temptation. It might be that you escape falling. Very interesting passage. So what can we learn from the Old Testament? Well, we learn there is a God, and we learn that He has a relationship with man. I want to say something here. My time's gone already, but I got to say this. Everything from the Old Testament to the beginning to the end of the New Testament points to the relationship that God has with man. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And every single man, woman, and child has a relationship with God, whether they know it or not. The relationship. Listen to what Jesus said. Matthew 25. Depart from me, for I never knew your relationship. Do you see that? Paul said to the Thessalonians, he's coming again, flaming fire, taking vengeance of those that know, that know not God. What do you have? Relationship. God wants a better relationship with us. And we learn that we are accountable to Him. So He deals with us. If we obey Him, rewards, positive rewards. And I should have put positive out there. I'm sorry. If we disobey Him, punishment. And these things become our examples to encourage us to obey God. And that could have said to encourage us to keep the covenant we made with God. Verse 13 tells us we always have a way of escape from temptation. Go to God. Get His strength. God would not allow it any other way. For He makes the way of escape for us. That's a pretty big lesson there, even if I did cut it short.